the two big challenges you face as human are believing other people exist and believing you're going to die.
You know, because I'm the sort of person that will read a book and believe it because someone's written it. If they've taken the effort to write it, it must be true. You know, I watched all those documentaries on 9/11 as conspiracy theory documentaries and believed them because they were so convincing, only because someone was telling them to me with confidence.
I mean, maybe there are gods or angels who are not human, who have a mental life but no biological life. They're immaterial and yet conscious, thinking beings. I suppose that might be the case. I doubt it, but you never know. That wouldn't imply that it was possible for you or I to become like a god or an angel and to have a mental life without any biology.
And in the context of mind uploading, one of the theories is that we are actually already living in a simulation, and if we die, we might sort of enter a different simulation, really.
It's like the old story about having a new hammer. Everything looks like a nail, and Silicon Valley's got this amazing hammer, and they please God, give us some nails.
On the one hand, we inscribe technology with meaning, but on the other hand, it seems that we use the things that we create to explain the things that are unexplainable.
Well, I'm Eric Olson, Professor of Philosophy at the University of Sheffield. I work in, well, this is the hard part of the question, I suppose. Well, I think about what sort of thing a human being is, generally speaking. So, what's the difference between a human being and a stone, for example? Is it just a difference in the sophistication of its psychology and its behavior, or is a human being something utterly different from a stone? For example, is it not a material thing at all? Suppose that I had scanned you as you came in the door. Well, so I have some super fast scanning machine which is imperceptible to you. It's like having an X-ray take. It's very quick, painless, you don't notice it at all. So we got all this information, okay, all the information that would enable us to build a sort of synthetic duplicate of you, duplicate in a psychological sense. Okay, so we do that. So I've got another assistant who has now built this inorganic machine, this inorganic duplicate of you in the next room. Okay, so in the next room there is some sort of inorganic machine who is a psychological duplicate of you. Okay, she's got all of your beliefs, all of your preferences, all of your quirks and tics and sense of humor, and all of your goals and plans, and so on. And of course, that machine thinks it's you, and since it's got, what's more, it thinks it was a living biological human being a moment before, or up until the time when you walked in the door. Anyway, okay. But of course, that being isn't you. You're still sitting there. You're still a flesh and blood human being. So we've created a new person who is deluded about her or its past. It's pretty clear. It's clear enough, I hope, that they could both be you. Okay. We create a person who mistakenly believes that she is you. It seems clear that that's what happens in this case. Of course, this is not the case that the transhumanists are talking about. They imagine a case where you die and then make a duplicate. And in that case, it's not so obvious that duplicate is not you, because there's not a rival around to make it clear that you've just all that's happened to you is that we made a scan of you and copied certain information. extracted certain information from you and used it to build something else. Suppose we change the example. So suppose we have a duplicating machine. Okay, so what it does, it scans you just as before, but instead of making a synthetic psychological duplicate of you, it just makes a physical duplicate of you. Okay, so out walks a human being exactly like you, both physically and mentally. Okay, so we could duplicate any physical object in this way, a dog or a cat or a car or whatever you like. Okay, so once again, we scan you and we make a duplicate of you, and then we kidnap you, and we hold you in the cellar of this building, let's say, in a dungeon for indefinitely, and the duplicate who we've just created walks out, thinking, of course, that she's you, and she goes back to your house and slips into your interpersonal relationships and so on, and no one is ever the wiser, since I'm not going to tell anyone, and you're locked away so that you can't tell. So this imposter, as you might like to say, not deliberately imposter, but this fake, this copy, has taken over your social life and your bank account and everything else. Well, okay, and all of your mother and all the people you know will think that this is you, mistakenly, of course. So I suppose she would have your social identity in the sense that you were talking about. If we kept you hostage in the cellar for a long time while your duplicate went out and took your place, in one way that would be not as bad as if we simply killed you and replaced you with a duplicate. Or, sorry, not as bad as if it might be better to have a duplicate to carry on in your place than simply to die, because the duplicate will have a commitment to your projects. But there are certain things that you want to do because those are worthy things and they ought to be done. Okay, and of course, if you die in normal circumstances, then there'll be no one left to carry out those. There'll be no one left who has those commitments. Okay. So if when you die you can be replaced by a duplicate, then the duplicate will be committed to the same things that you were committed to, and she will love your partner as you would have and carry on your artwork and fight for your political causes and all of that. And that's a good thing and worthy of desire. Okay, that would be a comfort. So if I were told today that I had terminal cancer and I was going to be dead within a month, but they could make a duplicate of me, free of cancer, that would be small comfort, because that person will be able to finish my projects and carry on, fight for the things that I think are important and be a partner to my partner and so on and so forth. Okay. In one way that would be a comfort, but of course in another way it wouldn't be, because I'm not going to do those things. I mean, in a way, to know that someone else indistinguishable from me will be in my partner's bed and in my partner's arms after in the future, that's gives me comfort on my partner's behalf, because I love her and I want her to be happy, and she will be happy if she doesn't know that it isn't me. Okay, but I'm not going to be happy. So this is a sort of high-minded and selfless desire that's satisfied by having a duplicate to carry on my place.
I'm Alexander Ornella. I'm a lecturer in religion at the University of Hull. My research interest is, broadly speaking, religion and popular culture, religion and science fiction, the portrayal of the human body or the enhanced human body in popular science fiction film, such as Avatar or Transcendent or a Transcendence or a Transcendent Man. and the religious narratives, the religious language that are used to describe possible human futures. If you go onto the website of, for example, the Alcor Cryonics Institute, they have a library section, a section with readings and FAQs, and one section deals with the relationship between cryonics and religion, whether or not cryonics and religion is compatible, or whether or not you as a Christian believer, practitioner, could sign up for having your body frozen. And one of the interesting debates I find on the website was the question, when does the soul actually leave the body? Does the soul leave the body when you are declared legally dead? Or does the soul leave the body at another, maybe later stage? And the narrative in these questions is that your soul doesn't necessarily leave the body when you're declared dead. Dead, but that's when cryonics comes in, when they preserve your state, your current state, so your soul can maybe survive in the frozen body, and then you can resume life at the point where technology is ready to heal if you had any illness that we can't heal or cure today, and then you can resume life. Max Moore at the conference, Max Moore was he was also making the point that if Catholics, for example, wish to engage in transhumanism, they could just suspend the aging process for a given time, and when they are ready to die or when they wish to die, they can just resume the natural aging process, and that sort of gets around the argument that it might actually, if you can't die anymore, you might have to commit suicide, which you can't do either. So the way Max Moore phrases it or creates the narrative around it is that there is a natural aging process that we might be able to suspend and resume at some point in the future. Mind uploading means that at some point in the future we might be able to upload our mind into a computer system and then exist in a virtual world, in a simulation on a computer system, on the internet, or whatever that future system might be called. And in the context of mind uploading, one of the theories is that we are actually already living in a simulation, and if we die, we might sort of enter a different simulation, really. And Julia Prisco, in an essay, says he's quite aware that the whole thing sounds more like a mythology rather than something that you can back up with scientific research. And then the interesting bit he says is, but it's a mythology that is in line with or corresponds with rationality and a scientific worldview.
So we live in a very technologically dominated time. Technology will save everything. We look at it in the discourse of the state, but Silicon Valley itself is. Evgeny Morozov talks about what we call solutionism, which is a great name for the paradigm, because it's very, I think, earnestly meant. It's well intended. I think a lot of these guys at Silicon Valley honestly believe that if we just add more internet to everything, things will get better. I really believe a lot of these people are genuinely sincere in what they believe. I also believe that they just really don't understand enough about people and themselves to see where the blind spots are. But there is this sense that it's like the old saw about having a new hammer. Everything looks like a nail, and Silicon Valley's got this amazing hammer. And they please God, give us some nails, because it's so geared up. It's been so hyped now. It's such a huge lump of effort waiting to go somewhere.
if you look back in history, paintings of the afterlife in a Christian context, for example, there are quite a few paintings where heaven and hell are full of technologies of the time. So hell is full of torture instruments and technologies, and heaven is full with musical instruments and technologies. So it seems that technology, there is something about technology, that we inscribe technology with meaning, but also that we use technology to describe non-earthly, non-mundane forms of existences, and that we use technology to make sense of something that's beyond. On the one hand, we inscribe technology with meaning, but on the other hand, it seems that we use the things that we create to explain the things that are unexplainable. When you said about weighing our options about the future, what always comes to mind is Pascal's bet, where he sort of contemplates the safer bet or the safer options, a life on earth with a few sacrifices in order to gain a potential eternal life, or a life we live to the fullest with the danger of losing the option of an eternal life. So he makes those considerations in the context of whether or not there exists, God exists, or an afterlife exists. And he contemplates what's the better option to choose from, and what do we have to sacrifice in order to gain the greatest gain in a way, which is eternal life. And he comes to the conclusion it's the safer bet to live a short lifespan with a few sacrifices and then sort of have eternal life, rather than live life to the fullest and risk the opportunity for an eternal life.
If we needed any other reason to think that it was impossible, the lack of actual time travelers would show that it is that it can't be done.
How do we know that they're not? How do you know we're not all time travelers?
I mean, that's what you'd say if you were a time traveller.
Oh yes, maybe you're a time traveller.
Well, okay. You can always make up some story about why the time travelers are hidden and not obvious, but that's just ad hoc. What we observe is nothing like what we would expect to observe if there were time travelers appearing from the future.
How would we know? What would they?
Because you would see a being appearing out of nowhere, I suppose, right? We would see things happening which were in no way explained or caused by previous events, but rather caused by events long in the future, and no such thing has been observed. I was going to say that the technology on which transhumanism is meant to be based does not exist. None of it exists, and there's no reason to expect that it will exist in the near future. The confident belief that it will happen seems to be based on the thought that because technology has given us all sorts of wonderful and unimaginable things, it can give us anything that we want. And what we want most of all, I suppose, is to overcome death. So, and I think that's where this belief comes from. And it's very much like the belief that the ancient Egyptians had that mummification technology would give them life after death, or eternal life, or something like that. And of course, we know that was silly, and I suppose it was sort of silly. But I suppose the technology that they had was as impressive to them then as ours is to us now. But I think we're no closer to immortality today than the Egyptians were 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago.
It's quite interesting when you said none of the technologies transhumanists count on exist today and won't exist in the near future, but in a transhumanist context there is the belief that in the near future we will be able to do all these things. And that again, there's a religious connotation about that, because
It's just around the corner.
Yeah, we find
No
a
doubt
number of religious
Yeah.
communities that have sort of this belief that in the near future something is going to happen. Either that, if you look at early Christianity, early Christians lived in the belief that the second coming of Christ is near, that they might even witness the second coming of Christ in their lifetime. But we can observe the same thing, the same belief in today's context. Before the turn of the millennium, for example, and so on, there's something deeply religious about the understanding that in the near future, the technology is almost at hand, which will allow us to do all those fantastic things, as you said, overcome death, for example.
You said earlier that transhumanism is not at all monolithic, and that's very true. I would say 90% of people who would describe themselves as transhumanist are probably no more transhumanist than the people who identify as steampunks or actual Victorians. It's an aesthetic for most people. It's it's like punk rock. It's the cyborg version of punk rock. But there's, in the same way that there was the tip of the punk iceberg were people who are engaged in the theory and the art of it. But then there are an awful lot of people who just kind of liked, tartan bondage trousers and thought they'd dress up like that. There's an aesthetic engagement with something that appears visually and rhetorically of its time. But I don't think the vast majority of people who spend any time identifying with it publicly in that very performative way that culture works now. They wouldn't, you could mention Max Moore and Julia Briscoe to it. They probably, it's something they know from novels, and in the same way that people choose to dress up as characters from Terry Pratchett's Discworld, it's not that they think they can go there and be that, but there's something in that they want to bring out of it and recapitulate in real life.
I wonder if it's in part because computer technology, which I suppose is what's driving a lot of this, is new in the sense that we haven't yet learned its limitations.
So there's something about the biological machine, the substance, the meat that we're made of, that we are a long, long, long way from recreating digitally. But it's a very contested area. So some people would say, although it's a good metaphor to think of the brain as a computer, that's not what it does. And if you manage to recreate the computations that the brain did, you still wouldn't have recreated the mind. So under that understanding, we would never be able to copy the human psyche, human mind to computers. The strategy of psychology has been to take apart the mind into component processes and then look at how we can recreate, understand or interact with those component processes, sometimes in artificial machines. So you can have a temperature sensor can learn how to control the temperature of a room, maybe like we learn to control the temperature of our bodies, by trying to lower it when you're above a set point, trying to raise it when you're below a set point. The question is, can we put it all back together again? And the answer is still a long way away because we don't know what we don't know, and that's what people call the hard problem of consciousness. So if I was going to take a bet on what people would do with the future of computers copying the mind or interacting with the mind, we'll have good interaction, so we'll be able to control a mouse cursor with our thought, by reading the electrical activity from the scalp, or we'll have augmentation, so a diary that tells you where you should be, or maybe reminds you that 3 years ago you were doing this thing. We'll use artificial devices to augment ourselves, which we've always been doing ever since we kept records. Writing is a kind of artificial augmentation. But the chances of copying yourself are not going to be possible until we can build machines as complex as the machines on which our cells run, i.e. our biological brains. So we might get diminished copies. You know, you might be able to store, some vestigial trace of things that are part of you, but you won't be able to store you. We've made tremendous advances in computers in terms of smarts, so prodigious memories, or are they autocomplete? You know, they can correct the computer corrects my grammar and my spelling. It tells me where I was last year. It tells me what I was probably searching for on Google. But it's not. We haven't made such advances in personality. Computers don't have a lot of personality in the way that people do. So. I'm sorry it's not an optimistic answer. I don't know if don't know if science has a lot to offer apart from informed speculation. So, I guess the moral is it's easy to fake it when people aren't trying to catch you out. Or it's easy for a machine to talk to a human like a human, rather than talk to a human like a machine. But you wouldn't want to have yourself grafted to that level of machine intelligence, because then you just become an empty reflection of all all the cliches and things you said before. Whereas we believe that something about ourselves is the ability to respond with innovation, to respond creatively or novelly to new situations, rather than just to parrot what other people have said or echo what we've said before. And so the wrong turning in the future of copying ourselves to machines would be where we all upload ourselves and think that we've copied every memory, every thought we've had, and everything we've said, and the machine can recombine them, but it recombines them in a way that doesn't recreate the cause that made us feel those things or say those things in the first place. It just spins the wheel and throws up a few phrases that we've said before in a seemingly interesting combination. And what we have got to learn to do is work out what the bits of intelligence are that we're particularly good at as humans, and how we can use them in concert with machine intelligence, rather than worrying about them coming and taking away, rather than them replacing us. So I think it's going to be a story about us learning to kind of coordinate with the algorithms. So we're going to have it's going to become more and more explicit that there are some jobs that are just going to get done by computers, whether it's telling whether there are unexpected items in the bagging area, or what the route is to go between two locations using the sat-nav, or what you might be looking for when you Google for something. And we're going to have this dance where the computers try and guess what we want, and we learn to display certain behaviours or interpret what we're told we want by the computers to our ultimate advantage, the thing we really want. There's a social network called Facebook, and you have this algorithmically curated feed on your front page, so you log in and you don't see what your friends are saying. You see a selection that Facebook thinks you want to see. So one thing they've been doing is if it's detectable from your Facebook profile that you're a Republican in America, they will hide sentiments that are likely to be Democratic. So because they make you upset, So you, and vice versa, so they curate your feed so that you are presented with consonant political opinions rather than dissonant ones. Yeah, so they've got, I mean, that's part of the story, is that computer intelligence has virtues that we don't have. And that means they can search through a database of 65 million possible chess games to see what the next best move is. I can't remember what it's called. Clive Thompson's book. I think it's called Smarter Than We Think. Where he talks about whether the internet is making us dumb, basically. And he's got an optimist's take on it, so he's talking about how lots of technology is allowing us to connect to each other, to think better thoughts, to be more creative. It's an antidote to all those stories that technology is making us more isolated and less intelligent and less innovative. And the first chapter is about computer chess. So we all know that when the people started designing artificial intelligence, they thought, what's the high point of human intelligence? Like chess, it's an incredibly cerebral game. No computer will ever be able to beat a human at chess. And then it turns out that chess is actually something that's relatively easy for a computer to do, because it's a limited world, it's 64 squares, there's a limited set of rules. Indeed, there is style and creativity and intuition, but using brute force, a computer can beat the best chess players in the world. It doesn't play chess like a human plays chess. It doesn't think about the chess moves like a human plays chess, but it can, by brute force, beat almost any human player. But where Clive Thompson takes the story is, the interesting thing is where you get teams of humans and computers playing chess together, and what the progress in the game of chess is now being made by people who are learning, who are not necessarily the best chess computers, or necessarily the best chess players, but who are best at coordinating themselves between the chess computer and the chess player. So the chess player has an intuition about what possible moves it should give the chess algorithm to compute, and that's what allows them to build something that's got the virtues of both the artificial intelligence and the human intelligence in playing chess. So placebo effect is a good example. So, placebo effect is where you respond to a medicine because you believe it's got some active physical property that's healing, or you respond to a medical encounter because of the meaning you put on it. So you think, this is a doctor, and doctors are healing, I'm being looked after, and therefore you feel less pain or you recover quicker. And all medical trials have to have a control condition, which is typically the placebo. So they give you the drug, or they give you the operation, which they believe will help, but they also do a sham operation, or they give you a pill that has no active component. And the reason is because that placebo condition is so strong that people get better just because they're undergoing a medical treatment, even if there's nothing that the doctors think is in that medical treatment that should help them get better. So that's life and death issues. That's about people's real pain, their real chances of improving or not surviving, and that's affected just by belief in that they're part of a healing encounter, a medical experience. There's this idea that's very fashionable at the moment called Bayesian computation, which is that you work out what's right about the world by combining the new evidence you've got with your prior beliefs. But what that does is it gives you a framework for putting your expectations about the world into how you process new information. And so what we know is that there is no raw perception of reality. You're always combining what you already know and what you already expect. And so that's why if you believe someone's a robot, you will overweight the bits of their behaviour that confirm that. So if you believe they're human, or if you believe a robot is a human, you will overweight the bits of their behaviour that make them look like they're a human. You don't ever get to kind of jump out of the circle and see things just as they are. You're always doing this process of hypothesis testing, trying to confirm what you already believe or disconfirm. I think the two big challenges you face as a human are believing other people exist and believing you're going to die. We come into this world with this incredible machinery that allows us to hold beliefs and to form new beliefs and to inspect our beliefs, and we can do and beliefs can have amazing effects on us. The placebo effect affects how much pain we feel and how quickly we heal. You know, our beliefs about identity and meaning will allow people to sacrifice their lives for other people. Beliefs are this incredible engine of possibility. But because of that, we can hold all these improbable beliefs, it also allows us to not believe by instinct some things that are definitely true. So it's definitely true that we're not the only ones, we're not alone, other people have inner lives as rich as ours, and it's definitely true that we're going to die just as everyone else has died. But I don't know if that's how you feel, you know, as a child, or if I could say it out now that I know I'm going to die, or I know I'm not the only one with a rich inner life. But I don't know if I really believe it, or if I've come to really sincerely endorse that. And so I think growing up is the process of believing in other people and believing in your own end. And so I think, interestingly, the end of the world as we know it beliefs are a little bit of they're the mirror of that not really believing in your own death and not really believing in other people. So believing that the thing that will make sense of all of life is going to happen to you, and it's going to happen to you soon, and you're the one who's seen it, has the same egotism that believing that you are the centre of the world and that you're never going to die. So it would be interesting to imagine a world where this had happened and where we didn't die. And I wonder what the knock-on consequences would be for our psychology and our culture, because hitherto in history we've always organised our individual stories and our societies around that fact, because it's been so unavoidable, undeniable that we're all heading towards the grave, and often very rapidly, especially in other times and places. And so our age is maybe exceptional in the extent to which we're allowed to distance ourselves from an intimate familiarity with imminent death. So I think that some of the life extension people do these calorie restriction diets. Yeah. So that's a good example of generalising from outside of, a risky generalisation outside of the evidence, that you get these animals and you give them these calorie restricted diets and they live longer. But it might be that lab rats are usually overfed and that's why they're not living so long. It doesn't mean that if you don't have enough calories for 50 years you're going to live to 100. It might be true, but then you're going to spend 50 years being hungry. So. Yeah. So when we started building artificial intelligence, we looked around and said, what's the most intelligent thing? And it was things like logic and maths and chess. And we started building machines. And those things turn out to be the things that machines are really good at. But actually recognizing emotion, or coming up with a new use for a brick, or recognize, okay, yeah. those things are harder, things which aren't so easily described by logic. And I think in parallel to that, we tend to think of our consciousness or self as this kind of like inner flame, that's a kind of a substance that's, you know, inside the skull, at the center of the mind. It's not about my perception, it's not about, you know, I can be me with my eyes closed, I can be me in a sensory deprivation tank, I can be me when I'm asleep, I can, you know, there's some inner center. But it might be that the thing that's important about your consciousness is your interaction with the world and your ability not just to perceive, but to respond to what you're seeing, and say, throwing your consciousness to somewhere else is as simple a matter as, you know, opening a video call.
There's some interesting, really fascinating drawings by Fritz Kahn. I don't know if you've seen them, but they are from the early 20th century, and they depict, the drawings are called human being as, or the human body as industrial palace, and it sort of depicts the interior of the human body, but all the imagery, the icons are used from the industrial age. So the human body, the interior of the human body is completely void of flesh and blood. But it's just sort of imagery and iconography from the industrial age, from production places and so on. And that was used at the time to explain in a popular way how the human body might work. So there are lots of interesting drawings similar to what you said.
Yeah, and so I expect you'd see at the same time as well, you'd see other disciplines picking up on that metaphor to, you know, especially what you were speaking earlier about how people argue for research they want to do. So when you're doing that, you have, especially if you're trying to do something novel, you have to frame it in a way that, you know, so well, there isn't any precedent for explaining what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to do something a bit like that, but instead of doing it to that thing you usually do that to, I'm doing it to this other thing. Oh, okay. And so there is this, you get this reliance on metaphor there, so you probably get people, you know, I'm guessing around that era would start using very, you know, terms that mechanics would use around engines to start describing the sort of things they were trying to do. And so if you look now at a lot of, the rhetoric of you know, self-help and cognitive behavioural therapy and stuff like that, we're starting to see the language of cybernetics popping up in psychology now, because we have reached a cultural point where, although most people wouldn't necessarily put it in those terms, we think of ourselves as homeostatic systems to some point, and we have this vague idea that, you know, the system has to kind of balanced or managed in certain ways, and so there's always this falling back to the metaphor, and you know, we're storytelling creatures. We have a narrative bias. It's kind of how we understand our relation to space-time.
So perhaps in the future, when the computer boom has run its course, we will look back and see it in much the way that we now see mummification in ancient Egypt. We'll know what it can do and what it can't do, and we'll see then that it can't get us any closer to immortality than embalming could. I mean, again, what we most want, I suppose, is to overcome death, and we will. I imagine it's human nature to always be coming up with, always imagining ways in which this might be accomplished.